Hello, this is Here to Learn. I am Matt Edwards, and this is my podcast featuring conversations that I have with colleagues and friends in education, people that I've gotten to know and learn from in my time as an educator. Today's conversation is with a woman who is probably the most encouraging and supportive person I've met throughout my time in education, and I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. She has such an interesting background, a wealth of experience, and she is a digital media teacher. She has experience in magnet schools and multiple levels of education, and her unique perspective on developing students and providing opportunities for kids that aren't in our core classes or in our traditional schools, and finding ways to motivate and excite kids to be in education, and how giving them those opportunities is something that is to be celebrated and commended for our public schools. So I hope you really enjoy it. Here's Lorry Romano. Well, thank you again for being willing to chat with me today, Lorry. I'm so excited to get to finally have this conversation on the podcast with you, because you're somebody who I think about often whenever I get ideas or I just I'm intrigued with a topic. You have this approach to listening and hearing other ideas, and not just overpowering conversations or other people's ideas, and it makes me want to be a better listener, but also, like, I always am curious what you're curious about. So I'm just so excited to have you here to share you with our audience. I do want to introduce you a little bit. I know that you are from this Wake County area, went to school at Cary High School.
Go Imps.
Tell me a little bit from there. Go Imps. Oh, my goodness.
Yes, I think it's the most unusual mascot in the country. But yeah, so I went to Cary High School. My family came down with that great influx that came in through IBM.
Okay.
In the late 60s, early 70s. And I loved Cary High School. It's a great school to go to. And then all I had to decide, as my parents were very much considered that education is the most important thing. Only one of my parents graduated from high school and took any college. My mother did not graduate from high school, but both of them told us, my brother and sister and I, as we were growing up, we are saving money and you are going to college. So your choice is what college. Mm-hmm. So there was never, when you're raised like that, that's all you think about.
That's
what
right.
College. And so I chose NC State for wildlife biology initially. I had a great biology teacher in high school. But I spent about a year in biology at State, and I was like, I don't know, I think I really liked my biology teacher.
Right.
I still have a lifelong love of science and biology, but I drifted over into the communications department, got a degree in radio television, decided to join the Navy, and was commissioned as an officer and served 8 years. My mother got sick, and I got out and stayed in the reserves, but I got out. Got a master's in film, thinking I would teach college.
Okay.
But the school system, as I was working my way through grad school, the school system, not that they contacted me, but I looked up an old friend at Athens, and she was at Athens. I had not taught at Athens yet. And she needed a video made for the CTE department. And I said, I did that in the Navy, I'll do that. So anyway, I made a video. Someone saw the video. They hired me as a video production specialist. So I was a video production specialist at Wake County for about 2.5 years before I was hired at Athens. And that's while I was doing my grad program. And what's interesting about that, from my perspective, is I didn't think about teaching about public schools. I wasn't thinking about that. But being a video production specialist put me in and out of schools all over Wake County. Okay. And every year I would do the Teacher of the Year videos. And I would do the Principal of the Year videos that they would show at the banquets. So I got to see some of the best educators in the county. And I think it's interesting, what I remember from that time is walking in a school, and as soon as you walked in a school, you could tell whether it was a great school or not. Really? How clean it was, what was put up on the walls, how people greeted you. Okay. What happened when you walked in the classroom. And those things stayed with me, certainly. I'd finished my graduate program And a job opened up at Athens Drive, and I still had my thesis to go.
Okay.
And the teacher there, who knew me from video production, said, "Oh, you should come take my job because I'm going to go to the middle school." We had children. And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I like teenagers."
Right.
It's kind of like, maybe not.
Every day?
I thought, oh, you know what, I'll give it a year.
Right.
And I found I really love teenagers, and I especially love high school because these students are right on the brink of adulthood. And you can help them over, you can shove them a little bit.
That's right.
Encourage them, but it's a really interesting time. So I ended up spending 5 years at Athens Drive. Great principal there. Walt Sherlin was a principal. He was later principal of the year in North Carolina. So I got to work for a principal of the year. Dana King, who becomes my principal at Millbrook later, she was principal of the year in North Carolina. I got to work under some great leadership and would have stayed, probably still be teaching at Athens today. But my mother got sick, and I went down to Florida. Taught in a performing arts high school, a public high school, a magnet school that kids audition to get in. And then I saw the power of magnet schools.
Right.
And how public education was trying to find ways to attract students to school, not just cookie cutter them through, but to really address the fact that when kids enter the building, especially high school where it is that place between adulthood or college or whatever, how can we provide programs that really excite them and make them want to be at school? So yes, they have to do English, yes, they have to do science, yes, they have to do math, but if they get to do chorus, or if they get to do drama, or if they get to do art, or if they get to do creative writing or dance or whatever it is they're into, how that informs their academic classes. So I worked there at Douglas Anderson. I built a film program there because I had a master's in film. We call it cinema arts now. And then my father got sick and I came back here and worked at Millbrook High School for 8 years and also a magnet school. And I just can't say enough good things about Millbrook. I think it's the top school in the county, in my opinion. You can start, throwing around data and say, oh, Enloe this or Broughton that. But I truly feel like the faculty at Millbrook tries every day to meet kids where they're at.
Right.
And if you can't find yourself at Millbrook as a teenager, you're not looking hard enough because there's a strong arts program, there's an agricultural program, that have the IB program, they have terrific athletics. And the athletics are not just open to the varsity athletes, they have strong JV programs, they have no-cut programs at the JV. And so there are lots of clubs, an international perspective. And again, just some of the best teachers I've ever met in my life. So that's
well, and that's, I think that's very flattering for the entire staff there, and that's a big motivator for wanting to share these conversations, because I've arrived at that same conclusion as you. Just from working there, I've just been so fascinated with the different types of people that work in that building, and the conversations just to have in between classes has always been something that's been something that I've been very excited about. I did want to talk to you a little bit about what you taught and cinema arts and cinematic arts, and how you've gotten to work with kids and gotten to really kind of unearth some passion and some excitement for school that I don't necessarily see in my math classroom, and what advantages or what kind of things were you able to experience with some of your students in your classroom, because it was a non-core, non-traditional, sometimes there are elective classes in other schools. What was that like, teaching one of those classes and that experience with some of those kids when they kind of had, I never was excited about English, I never was excited about biology, but I was excited about film, or I was excited about chorus. What was that like, teaching in that environment?
So when I got to Millbrook and when I was hired as the digital media teacher. And so that was teaching just an elective course in Digital Media 1, and then there's an advanced course of digital media. And And that was fine. Anybody who wanted to could take it. And so within a classroom, I'd have some high achievers, I'd have some middle achievers, and I'd have some low achievers. The other thing I had in the classroom that you don't necessarily have in the classroom, not every teacher has, is I had computers. And I didn't just have PCs, I had Macs. And I really can't speak highly enough about Macs because they are more intuitive than the PC, and they're easier to operate. They crash less. They're less prone to viruses and things like that. Some really, really great programs that people have developed for the Mac platform. I think that if you had a Mac classroom, there's lots of things that you could, when a student walked in, could do, both hands-on, just on the computer, but then they could take what they do and you could take them out and shoot videos of mathematical concepts or things and then bring it back. So I was fortunate in that kids love computers and they spend a lot of time on their computers, and now of course they have their computers in their pocket, they have their phones, which is another significant change I've seen in that 8 years. Within the first year that I was at Millbrook, phones weren't a huge deal. They quickly became so as the phones got smart, and the smarter phones got, the more difficult it was to teach, because the phone gives immediate gratification. You wonder about something, click, 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 you know it. Teaching doesn't. Sometimes to master a concept takes a lot of struggle and effort.
Correct.
So, but anyway, I digress. I did have a computer lab, so that puts me in an advantage over other teachers, because when students walk in, I've got a full slate of things for them to do. And they already like computers, so they're already engaged. And a lot of them really like Macs. So they're truly, it was one of the few places in the school to get a Mac. But my principal challenged me to, when she hired me, she said, I need a kid magnet. I need someone that really will draw students into this program, not just anybody that the wheel turns, but kids who want to be there. And she knew me from Athens because I had taught under her. And at that time, it was just television production, no digital anything. Everything was analog and tape. But now things were digital. And so I took that on as a challenge. And within a year or two, when they said, would you consider having an academy at Millbrook? I said, yes, I think a digital media career academy would be great. And we have two now. We have 2 full classrooms now of Macs. And students want to be there, and they want to learn how to do Photoshop, and they want to learn how to do video editing. They want to do audio production and animation and web design. These are all things, no matter what they do later in life, whether they become lawyers or doctors or start their own business, this digital media information was something they could use later on. And it's a point I made over and over in my classroom. But I did, in the time that I was at Millbrook, fully embrace the Digital Media Career Academy concept. And part of the reasons why I did that is taking what I learned from that magnet school down in Florida, that if some part of a kid's day is doing something they really enjoy and they get a lot of satisfaction out of, and they can see an end product, and they see a connection to something they might want to do in their future, that they are more engaged in the classroom.
Oh, absolutely.
And our graduation rate at Douglas Anderson School of the Arts in Florida was something like, I want to say 95%, meaning if you started as a freshman, when 95% graduated. I wanted to see the same thing in the academy, that if you started in the academy at Millbrook, that 4 years later, that our graduation rate would be pretty high. And I think it is. I don't know what the numbers are currently, but I know that our kids were getting outstanding senior, and we're doing some pretty significant things. The academy model also includes this, and I think it's an important element, that I would get together with the English teacher, and we would find at least, ideally we wanted 4, but if we got 2 in the early days, we were fortunate. Something that started in the English class, for example, reading about Oedipus and learning that story because you're studying it in English. And then in my class, I had them construct a movie poster. Well, if you were turning this into a movie, what would the movie poster look like? And do that creatively, and we printed those out. We did she was talking about the idea of revolution and revolutionary ideas. And so in my class, we did audio podcasts based on something that was written in. So that idea of a cross-curricular, where you see that what you're doing in this class really matters in that class too, and you can see a use. I think that's important, and something that why I think an academy is a strong concept, and one I fully believe in and back. And then, of course, at the senior level of the academy, which you may or may not know this, but at the senior level, on the senior year, they're actually going out doing internships, unpaid generally and free. But if they're interested in web design, we'll go be a web designer for this company. Or if you're interested in video production, go make videos for this company. Or if you want to learn more about Photoshop, or you want to do graphic design a brochure for this nonprofit.
Right.
And so those were some of the things that we were trying to make what they were learning in high school meaningful when they graduated, or whatever they did. Ideally, we would like to see them go on to college, whether it be a like a community college or a 4-year degree. But that was the idea. And also in our academy, the kids could get certified. So something like if you wanted to learn Photoshop, you could take YouTube videos, but if you want a certification, you're going to have to go to an authorized Adobe Center, sit down, pay $50 or more. I can't remember what it's more than 50, and sit down and take a test. And if you pass that test, now you've got a certificate. Well, the academy is structured such that in classrooms, students can test in classrooms, and the teachers were authorized proctors. And you could get certified. So we would have kids graduating from the academy with a certification in adult certification in Photoshop and Premiere and web design and things like that.
And they're starting down the road. I think, it's funny that we started talking about phones and being phones in their pocket and the instant gratification. You're making things like Oedipus Rex more accessible when you think about it in terms of a movie poster. How do we present these ideas and these themes to people today? And I think making kids reflect on, this is what you're learning, but how can we present it, and making it digital and putting it in somebody's phone to give them access to it, to where they can just feel more comfortable with it. I think that's an incredibly motivating and important thing. I want to tell you a story about one of your students that I taught. Okay. And I want you to react to this story and just tell me what you think. I'm not going to say his name, but you might figure out who he is. So when I was making some videos for my math classroom as just a way to kind of diversify my instruction, he was real critical of one of the videos one day. He said, "Mr. Edwards, if you just can invest like $10 in just like a decent microphone and get some editing software, this would be so much better." And I was kind of real smart aleck to him. I said, "I'm sorry, the Coen brothers were not available to do my films. I'm just doing basic things so you guys can learn at home, not just have to learn here." And he was just so upset that I just did not put the effort that was necessary into making these videos works of art. And this was absolutely one of your students at the time. And I just his reaction made me think a little bit about what's going on. So when you hear that, what does that make you think about?
Oh, that instead of being critical, he should have said, "Why don't you let me help you make those videos?"
That would have been nice too.
It's always easy to sit back and criticize. But, you speak about those videos, and that's something I admire about you, Matt, is that you, like many teachers at Millbrook, are not satisfied with the status quo. Yeah, you had a good year. Maybe you had some good scores. But you sort of take the good scores as they should be good scores. And then you look for the ones who aren't successful, and that's where you're focusing your efforts is, what can I do for those students who aren't as successful? And because the students come to you with all these different learning styles, these different how quickly they learn, I loved that you implemented that idea of direct instruction up here, video instruction here. If you've got it and you're working, you can work collaboratively over here. That's hard to manage.
Right.
It's almost easier just to say, sit down, be quiet. Here's what we're doing today.
This is what you're supposed
Get your
to do.
notebooks out. Solve this equation. It's somewhat easier. It's harder to really change your classroom so that students can learn in the way that best suits them. And so I would say even in my course, which was a CTE course, I had a aha moment in Florida when the CTE teacher came in to speak to our faculty. And for the most part, what he talked about teaching to mastery. And in that teaching to mastery, he lost a lot of the teachers. They walked out. They walked out kind of like, pfft, because what he was advocating was you need to teach until the kids master it. And you can't say, well, they flunked that test, so that's on them. They needed to study. Or, well, he didn't finish the project, so I gave him a 0 and he flunked the course. And he deserves it because he didn't. Or they didn't get that in on time,
right.
So I gave them 50 points or 0, whatever. But there were a lot of teachers at that school, not at Millbrook, but at that school, that balked at the idea that you should, that the obligation is on the teacher to teach to mastery. And I remember everyone else walked out kind of grumbling like, oh, that was a waste of time. And 2 teachers, myself and another teacher, stayed back and said, tell me more. And this was a CTE Teacher of the Year in Duval County, which is a big county. He had a son who had special needs. And so this was close to his heart that, yeah, his son is sitting in your classroom and he needs to be taught to mastery too. So I changed my teaching from that day forward, and I was teaching AP World History as well as film.
Oh my goodness.
At that time, I changed my teaching and I said, I need to teach to mastery. That is my job. And the other teacher, when I said I'm going to do this, he was like, well, you're just full of, you're not preparing them for the real world, Romano. You're not preparing them. In the real world, they're not going to be able to do this.
Oh, I fall into that trap.
And I said, we're not in the real world yet. We're in educational world, and we're trying to master content. And these are kids. These are young people. They're not adults. Adults, when you get older, you take a few hits. Hopefully you brush yourself up and get off. Sometimes these students, when they get hit, they get a belief system that they can't do it. And you need to say, yes, you can. And it's okay if you can't do it to the A level. I'll never do A. I'll never, ever be able to do math the way that Matt Edwards does math. Lorry Romano's not going to do that. But I may be able to get a B if I keep working. If I keep working. So in my classroom, I had projects, and I did have due dates. And yes, I would take a few points off if they were late. But if I got the work, I gave you points. And so you were not going to fail in my classroom in digital media. You didn't fail in my classroom unless you stopped working. You didn't show up. I never saw you. But if you would turn in work, and I would not give you an A for work that was a D, but you consider the number of projects you have for students. And if you turn the work in, you're going to get a C or better. And you keep it encourages you to keep working, because sometimes we don't know what these kids are going through. We don't know what happened last night. We don't know whether they got fed, whether they're home. We don't know anything. All we know is they're sitting in front of us. So maybe a C is the best that kid's going to do today. And the other part was testing. I don't think that testing is a good measure of how much you know. I think testing is a good measure of how well you test. And I have to say, I test pretty well. I can pass a test if it was in Russian, because I'm pretty good at the multiple guess.
There you go.
Doesn't mean I'm good at Russian. And so when it came to testing, you could take my test, my unit test, as many times as you needed to. Now, you can only get up to an 88. Because I'm not going to take away from those kids that did test and made an A. But an 88 meant that you could keep trying. And it helped me, because I could say to the student, I said, well, you kind of made a 70 on that one. You could try for the 88. And then it was up to them. And I would encourage them to try for a higher grade. What did that do? Well, because some students need to be exposed to the material 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Other kids can get it the first time. They'll get their A. They did their project on time. They got their A. But I am worried about those B, C, D, particularly F students. I'm worried about those kids. And I don't want them to stop working in my class because I go, well, that wasn't in on time, so that's a 0. Oh, you can only get a 50 on that test? Okay, well, I guess that's it for you.
Well, I do need to tell you something, Lori, and I don't know if you've ever thought about this, and I'm not exactly an authority on education, but I'm loud. So what you're talking about is slightly revolutionary. That is not the normal mindset for a lot of folks in our education And I think a lot of our parents and community, they were taught in the way that you're talking about, that one size all fits education, and that, look, all you got to do is work hard. And if you don't have the grade that you were supposed to have, then you just didn't work hard enough. And you have to take responsibility for that. And you can't have the top without the bottom. And some people are just in the bottom. And that mindset, actually, as harsh and as hurtful and non-inclusive as it is the norm. That is what's normal. But our administration with Wake County Public Schools right now has definitely gone through a philosophical shift, and we're moving more toward this, not a no child left behind, but everyone can have access to success. And there is an accountability level for teachers at this point that says, okay, after this certain point, who are your kids that are failing right now? Now we need to plan for those kids. Now we need to find a way, how are we going to give them ability to recover or have a chance at recovering what they didn't get the first time while still being able to stay on track. And that challenges teachers to say things like, have I been teaching to mastery? Or have I been just doing these activities that I really like? Or do I just know that I make a really good test and the kids that do well on it, those are the kids who really knew what they were doing? And that's something that I think is unique to public schools right now. And, recent with the State of the Union, and some of the things that have come out recently from our administration in our country and our state was that our public schools are failing. They're not doing for our kids, or for quote unquote the kids who should be doing well. They're not doing for them what they should be doing. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think we have failing public schools. I think some schools struggle. And if the population of the school is disadvantaged economically, socially, in different ways, it's a struggle. If you don't know where your next meal is coming from, if you don't know where you're going to sleep, it's hard for you to come to school and be a participant. On the other hand, public schools are feeding kids, and they are providing activities for kids. For some students, the hardest thing is summer, because they lose access to food.
That's right.
And even people that care.
Well, they lose access to structure sometimes too, in a less of a needs-based level.
So, I don't think our public schools are failing. I think that we need even more support and understanding for who our students are. I think that the fact that we have magnet schools is a reflection of the fact that people are seeing, hey, we need to find ways to keep kids in school. I wouldn't object to a school that was, you and I are both coaches, I wouldn't object to a public school that focused on health and nutrition and sports. That you came to school, your uniform was a sweatsuit.
Right.
and the buildings were about half a mile apart, so by the end of the school day,
everybody's fit by the end of the day.
You've run a half mile. I mean, that sounds like a wild idea, and yet I don't think it is. I think that, so I'm old, but it shocks me in some ways that many classrooms look the same as they did 40-some years ago.
Right.
They should not.
Right.
And again, I see us trying to do that. In Millbrook, for example, they took out all those lockers kids weren't using, and they put in these spaces, and you as a teacher, if you want to, can go to that space and really let the kids work in the way that they want to work. They're not going to sit, I don't know, like little tax auditors in rows of chairs to do the work. They're not. That's not how they think, and I don't know that we need them to think like that. We need them to be creative. We need them to be collaborative. We need them to be deep thinkers. So public schools need to change, but they're not failing by any means. And I just challenge people to come into a public school and really spend a day or two at different levels. Spend it as a principal, spend it as a teacher, spend it as a teacher assistant. I think, too, we have more of an understanding today than we ever did about special needs and not leaving those kids behind. And I think that's important, too, because those kids who have special needs, they're going to be out in our community as adults. And if we don't address their special needs now when they're young and find out ways that we can help them exist as an adult, they will become not problems, but certainly something in our community that we're going to have to worry about. And
Right.
we don't want to. We want them to be as productive as possible. So I don't think our public schools are failing. It annoys me when people say that, and I don't think that private and charter schools are the answer. All that does is create schools much like gated communities. Only if you make so much money can you be in this gated community. Only if you make so much money
Right.
can your kid be here. And if you have a child that is disruptive to the learning environment, instead of addressing those needs with special ed teachers and things like that, you just kick them out. And again, that is part of our community. Every kid matters. If it's your kid, it matters.
Right. And one of the things that I'm so incredibly proud of with just public education in America on the whole is that everybody gets a shot at it. And I think that's one of the things that makes us different from so many other places, if not every other place in the world. So when we see these ranking systems and the United States has plummeted to this place in math and science and literacy is at this, well, in our reality, those numbers should motivate us to improve and reflect on our practices, but what we have is an opportunity for everyone. And I think one of the things that public schools is so great with is that everybody is being addressed, everybody has access, and everybody is part of what we use to decide if we're successful or not. Are we reaching all these groups of people? And when we can avoid homogeneous situations and we're able to make sure that our classrooms look like what society looks like, what I see at the mall, what I see at a gas station, what I see at a concert, that diversity is matching what's in our hallways at our schools. And that's how our kids can really learn more than just, I think it's important to be able to factor. I think it's important to be able to solve an equation. But I think it's even more important to be able to communicate those things to people who don't think and act like you. I think it's more important to put yourself in somebody else's shoes that you didn't grow up with. And I think it's important for your parents to see kids of different backgrounds and ethnicities being friends, and how that can help change how we plan our world. And for me, when I hear public education is failing, well, actually public education gives everybody a shot at the thing that determines if they're going to be successful or not. And there's this idea that the tragedies happen or there is failures and these kind of things. And yeah, there are. But at the same time, I know in my school system, philosophically, things are changing that says just getting this percentage of kids in your classroom to pass or get a good grade is okay. And it's where we're going to start as far as our standard. But what we're looking for is 100% success. And success is not all determined by A's and B's. Success is sometimes determined by starting with passing and failing. Next, it could be determined by, can that kid stay in the room all day? Can that kid handle structure? Can that kid communicate what they're learning? Can that kid be an ambassador for what is happening in their world right now? And that's what is so incredibly important about the public schools that I work in, is that we are not only allowing ourselves to be determined by the top of the top, by the kids who are ultimately going to be Moorhead Scholarship winners or going to be future CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. It's also kids that are going to be productive citizens and make everything we do better, make our roads better, make our stores better, make our restaurants better, make our garbage pickup pattern better, dealing with after storm better. And for me, when you and I talk about our public schools failing, I don't think public schools are failing, because I know there are kids who got to take dance in a state-of-the-art dance studio this week at my school that would not have access to an instructor of that level, and to be around high-level dancers that are in their classes, and nobody said to them, you're not good enough, you don't look like what we need, you're not the right size, you don't have the right background. It was, come on in, take your shoes off, do a good job. And I think that mentality needs to be more of what we're celebrating instead of like poking holes in public school. They're not doing a good job. Let me take all my kids in this neighborhood where everybody looks like what I want them to look like, and we're going to make our own school do what we want it to do. And I feel like you're not helping. What you're doing is hoarding. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I'm in total agreement. I suppose if people were to label us, they would label us. They would say, people listening go, well, of course they feel that way. They're public school teachers.
That's
and
right.
Of course they feel that way.
Very biased.
But and we are shaped by our experiences. But as someone who went to a public school and didn't think about it, didn't think twice about it.
Absolutely.
And not as diverse as some public schools, but diverse in Cary. And then went to a public university, NC State, and then joined the Navy, a very diverse organization.
Very diverse.
And then came back to public schools. I just really believe in it. And it's not to say I wouldn't ever teach at a private school or whatever. I just believe that public schools provide opportunity to everyone. Everyone. And that, to me, is the most important thing, because I've always believed from a maybe deeply spiritual place that we all rise together or we fall together. And I want us to rise, and I see there's a lot of institutions that help us to rise. Public libraries help us to rise because they offer literacy. Public education helps us to rise. Public parks, public pools, things that are available to us regardless of how much money we have. Anybody can walk into a public library. Anybody can walk into a public park. Any student can walk into a public school. And I just find that to be very important. I don't want to live in a world where there's the haves and there's the have-nots. And
Absolutely.
The haves just put up the wall and you can't come over.
Absolutely.
I just don't believe in it.
I think it's the most American thing. I mean, think about people that were sick of status quo. They wanted something better. They knew that they deserved more, and that ceiling was really hurting their heads.
Right.
I think it's the most American thing when we say things like, this park is for everyone. I was walking the Greenway yesterday, and I saw so many different faces, and we were high-fiving as we passed because we were so thrilled to have this thing. And nobody paid a fee to get in, and it was for everyone. That is the most American stuff, and that is what I think is going to be so important, is that we protect the things that are for everyone. They help everyone, because when we help everyone, we're helping ourselves. Our life is better when the lives around us are better. And if we hoard and make our lives only our life is the one that we're worried about and we're taking care of, then you won't ultimately get to reap all of the benefits. You won't bear all the fruit because you've cut out some of the things that you could access from these other places that aren't in your backyard. And, to me, that is what I'm the most prideful as a public education teacher, as a North Carolinian and as an American. I think that sense of awareness of other people and that celebration, that's what is making this country amazing, and why everybody wants to come here. No matter if it is very tough times and it's challenging, because we have an identity crisis right now.
We do.
And so, I am excited when I see other people that care about other people. And that's the thing that excites me to do the tough parts of my job and whether my parenting and my working with my marriage and everything, all that stuff. There are challenges in your life, but I'm excited when I see other people that are wanting to make other people's lives better in the hopes that their life would be more fulfilled and enriched.
I can't disagree with anything that you said.
I feel like I'm the interviewee now.
Matt Edwards for Senate is what I'm saying.
No, man, golly, there's no Senate that would handle that. But I'm just so thrilled that I get to have conversations like this with you, and the role that you played with our students, being able to help them have access to things like that Mac Lab. You probably had some students that never even seen a machine like that before, but then after a while they become experts at it. And I think that that's happening all over public schools, not just Millbrook High School in Raleigh, North Carolina, but there's public schools everywhere that are giving kids access to things that they would not have had otherwise. And that's why public schools are thriving in a lot of ways. But I'm so excited. I'm glad that you're still supporting a lot of us that are still that are doing education now. I'm very jealous that you are retired and that you can look at us still, sometimes spinning our wheels at times. But I love having you around, and thank you so much for sharing with us today.
I'm glad to be here, and I'm subbing, so I'm out there seeing the county from a whole different perspective. I'm seeing the elementary, I'm seeing the middle, occasionally the high school, but it only reaffirms what we've been talking about, that there are teachers in this county every day working hard for kids, and they want to get better every year. They want to find solutions, and that is very encouraging to me, and I hope that the political systems will vote to reward that monetarily and with some amount of loyalty in terms of retirement, to reward that kind of commitment, because it takes extraordinary commitment to do the work that you do.
Well, thank you for saying that. I agree with you. I hope we continue to get behind this, because it takes the entire community to make it continue to work well. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Laurie.
You're very welcome. Bye.